There is a wound in the church today that does not bleed, and so it goes unnoticed. It does not cry loudly, and so it is rarely confronted. But it spreads quietly, like fog over the soul. This wound is lukewarmness, a coldness of heart wrapped in religious habit. Pope Leo XIV warns, "The devil no longer needs to tempt those who sleep. He only needs to keep them comfortable." The book of Revelation speaks sharply, "I know your works. You are neither cold nor hot. Because you are lukewarm, I will spit you out of my mouth." Revelation 3 verses 15 to 16. The church teaches that lukewarmness is more dangerous than sin openly recognized. Why? Because it pretends. It goes to Mass, but never worships. Says prayers, but never surrenders. It speaks of God, but never listens to Him. This soul is not in rebellion, but in routine. It no longer confesses because it sees no sin. It no longer prays deeply because it feels no need. It no longer weeps for the lost, longs for the Eucharist, or trembles at the cross. Saint Catherine of Siena said, "The lukewarm do more injury to the church than open enemies, because their coolness spreads to their children, to their spouse, to the parish." The lukewarm Catholic says, "I'm not that bad." But grace is not about being not that bad. It is about being on fire. Pope Leo XIV teaches, "Christ did not die to make you passive. He rose to make you burn. Do not accept the fog. Let your soul be awakened again, even if only by a whisper, because the coldest embers can still ignite, if touched by heaven's flame." Lukewarmness rarely arrives in a storm. It begins in subtle ways. Unnoticed compromises, delayed confessions, skipped prayers, distractions excused. The soul doesn't say, "I no longer love God." It simply stops remembering Him. Pope Leo XIV explains, "The flame of faith does not vanish. It dims slowly, like a candle smothered by breathless air." The Church warns that lukewarmness is a spiritual anemia. The soul functions, but without vitality. It knows the language of faith, but its heart no longer beats with it. And this slow fading is far more dangerous than sudden sin. It often begins with prayer becoming mechanical. Mass becomes a habit without hunger. The Rosary, once a comfort, becomes a burden. The sacraments become rare or rushed. Charity becomes occasional. And confession is postponed not because of guilt, but because of indifference. St. John Vianney once said, "The great tragedy is not when souls fall into sin, but when they no longer care." Lukewarm Catholics often believe they are fine. They may be admired by others, involved in church activities, even seen as leaders. But inside, no fire. They are like the fig tree Jesus cursed, full of leaves, no fruit. Pope Leo XIV teaches, lukewarmness is not peace. It is paralysis, and only the Spirit can rouse it. So how does one return? It begins with honesty. Admit the coldness. Speak it aloud in prayer. Say, "Lord, I am here, but I am numb. Light me again." Because the Father does not reject the frozen heart. He waits for it to admit its need. And then He sends fire, not always with feeling, but always with grace. Perhaps the most seductive lie whispered to a lukewarm soul is this: "You're doing enough." You go to Massachusetts. You say a prayer now and then. You believe in God. What more could He possibly ask? Pope Leo XIV confronts this deception. God does not ask for quantity. He asks for flame, for your heart. The Church teaches that faith without love is dead, and love without sacrifice becomes shallow. Lukewarmness survives by convincing the soul to measure itself against others, not against the cross. The lukewarm Catholic thinks, "At least I'm not like those people. I don't sin that much. God understands that I'm busy." But holiness is not about comparison. It is about communion. Saint Teresa of Calcutta said, "God does not call us to be successful, but faithful. Faithful with your time, faithful in your thoughts, faithful in moments no one sees." Lukewarmness withers the will. It whispers, "Later, maybe." It says, "Why try harder?" And so the soul drifts not into rebellion, but into boredom with God. This is the real danger. Not hatred of holiness, but forgetfulness of its beauty. Not rejection of truth, but indifference toward it. Pope Leo XIV urges, the lukewarm soul still bows the head, but no longer bows the heart. What can break this pattern? A sincere confession, a fast offered in silence, a decision to pray even when numb, a single act of mercy done when it's least convenient. These are small flames, but small flames light great fires. And heaven is not looking for your perfection. It is searching for your spark. Even if it's buried beneath ashes, even if it's flickering, faint, can still be fanned. The breath of God is enough. A lukewarm soul still prays, but its prayers are hollow. Words rise like smoke, but the fire is gone. The lips move, but the heart stays behind. And slowly, the soul forgets that prayer is not just speaking. It is burning. Pope Leo XIV reflects, prayer without desire is like a song without melody. It fades into the air. The Church teaches that prayer is the breath of the soul. But how many Catholics treat it like a checkbox? A morning rush of memorized words, a sleepy Our Father at night, a rosary prayed while scrolling, a distracted glance at the Eucharist. This is not prayer, it is performance. Saint Alphonsus Liguori taught, God desires only one thing in prayer, that you love him, even if only for a moment. But the lukewarm soul has grown too comfortable. It knows the prayers, but not the one being prayed to. It may even teach others while its own heart is drifting. And the greatest danger? It doesn't realize it, because outwardly nothing looks wrong. Mass is attended, the rosary is said, the rules are followed, but the heart no longer trembles, no longer longs, no longer loves. Pope Leo XIV teaches, God is not deaf, but he will not shout over our distractions. So what to do? Start by slowing down. Say one Hail Mary with true intention, not 5 decades in a blur. Sit in silence before the cross. Let your soul speak simply, Jesus, I don't feel anything, but I want to love you again. That is prayer. That is the beginning of heat. And the flame that returns through honesty will do more than fire born from habit. Because heaven listens not to volume, but to truth. One of the most subtle weapons of lukewarmness is delay. The soul says, I'll go to confession later. I'll pray better tomorrow. I'll return to real devotion when life calms down. But the devil does not need you to say no. He only needs you to say not yet. Pope Leo XIV warns, the lukewarm do not reject God. They postpone him. The Church, in her wisdom, calls us daily to examine the conscience. Why? Because the soul forgets. The heart grows dull. And sin, unconfessed, becomes habit. Saint Augustine confessed, I delayed my conversion. I said, soon tomorrow, and I almost lost everything. How many Catholics live this way? Confession once a year, if that. Sins pushed aside. At least I'm better than most. A heart slowly coated in dust. The sacraments remain available but unused. The soul stops trembling. The mercy of God is infinite, but our time is not. Pope Leo XIV teaches, delay is not neutral. It forms a habit, and habits form eternity. It is not about terror, it is about truth. Do not wait to be moved. Do not wait for Lent. Do not wait for a retreat. Return now. Make an honest confession, not mechanical but personal. Say aloud, Lord, I have drifted. Light me again. The priest does not need to see tears, but the heart must bow. And when it does, the fire returns. Even if dim at first, even if quiet, because heaven does not delay. When you move toward God, he runs toward you. Today is enough. Begin again. Perhaps nothing reveals lukewarmness more clearly than how we receive the Eucharist. For many, it has become a gesture, a habit, a line, a routine. But the Church teaches, the Eucharist is not a symbol. It is a flame. It is God himself. Pope Leo XIV cries out, if the Eucharist no longer moves you, it is not because it has changed. It is because your heart has cooled. The saints trembled before the host. Saint Jean Vianney wept at every consecration. Saint Francis would fall to his knees with awe. And yet today, so many walk forward distracted. Without confession, without preparation, without hunger. The lukewarm soul forgets that this is the same Jesus who walked on water, who bled on the cross, who will come again in glory. And he is placed into your hands, into your mouth, into your body. How can we receive fire and remain frozen? The Catechism reminds us, to receive communion is to receive Christ himself. CCC 1382. And yet, if we receive in routine, the grace is blocked, not by God but by our indifference. Pope Leo XIV teaches, the Eucharist transforms the hungry, not the full, the humble, not the proud, the awakened, not the sleepwalkers. So before you receive again, ask, am I in a state of grace? Do I approach with reverence? Have I confessed what I must? Do I believe with my whole heart? Because the Eucharist is not a prize for the good. It is the fire for the cold. But only if the soul opens. Even a flicker of faith is enough. Even a whisper, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And he will come, not as routine, but as flame. Lukewarmness rarely announces itself. It doesn't declare war. It slowly softens your will, clouds your desire, and numbs your soul. But the Church, like a good mother, teaches us to watch for signs of spiritual sleep. Pope Leo XIV reflects, the soul does not fall all at once. It drifts, like a boat with no anchor. What are these signs? You stop missing prayer and barely notice. Mass becomes a checkbox, not a hunger. Confession is postponed indefinitely. You avoid silence because it confronts you. You laugh at sin and call it freedom. You grow irritated by those who are devout. You begin to say, that's just how I am. And slowly, God becomes background noise. Saint Faustina wrote, lukewarm souls wound my heart most painfully. They were the reason I said, Father, take this cup from me. Because it is not hatred that wounds love most. It is indifference. Pope Leo XIV teaches, lukewarmness is not a moment. It's a mood, and it can become a lifestyle if not broken. So what can awaken the soul? Contrition, even a whispered act of sorrow, even one tear or the desire to feel one, even the humility to say, God, I miss you, even if I don't feel it yet. That prayer breaks ice. That cry invites heaven, because God does not require fireworks. He listens for movement. One rosary said slowly, one return to confession, one decision to fast again, one act of love for someone you've ignored. These are not small. They are sparks, and sparks ignite hearts that thought they were dead. There is mercy for every soul, even the coldest. But mercy must be accepted, and lukewarmness delays this moment, day after day, year after year, with the lie that there's still time. But eternity begins not when we die. It begins the moment we choose to love or not. Pope Leo XIV pleads, the lukewarm will not be saved by their excuses. They will be saved by their repentance. The Church is not calling you to emotion, but to decision. The Father is not waiting for tears, but for truth. Even now, in your heart, if you say, Lord, I have grown cold, but I want to burn again, then heaven opens. The flame returns. Grace flows like oil into your cracked places. Do not wait. The enemy of your soul wants delay, but the lover of your soul wants today. Return to confession. Return to silence. Return to the rosary, not rushed, but slow, even if only 1 decade. Return to the Eucharist, prepared, confessed, and in awe. Return to acts of love, even small ones, even unnoticed, because God does not count greatness. He breathes into sincerity. Pope Leo XIV concludes, there is still time to burn. There is still time to shine. There is still time for now. So begin, even if your hands are cold, even if your memory is full of failures, even if your voice trembles. Say again, come, Holy Spirit, and the fire will come.